to this Monday's night edition of The Light Gate. We're coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast. We are on Facebook, we're on Roku, we're on Rumble, and we are on YouTube. I would like to take this moment to thank our sponsor. It is Carnation Monday. Monday nights, we are honoring Carnation as one of our sponsors, and we thank you very much for your loyalty to us, and we are loyal to you as well. Y'all check them out. Okay, so we have a wonderful guest, and it's an interesting situation. And I thought I'd get one thing out. I'm wearing a cast, or it's like a cast. I have a broken elbow, so I'm not going to be moving around tonight, lot. This is what you're going to get out of me. And Preston's all ready to go. Go, Preston.
All right. Thank you, Dolly. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. It's episode 164 of The Light Gate. I, of course, am your host, Preston Dennett, along with my lovely co-host, Dolly Safran. We're so excited you could join us tonight. We have an amazing guest. I've followed his research for a long time. You probably have heard of him if you're at all familiar with this field of UFOs, the paranormal and cryptozoology. His name is Stan Gordon. I'll get to him in just a second. If you guys didn't get a chance to catch last week's show, what a blessing and so much fun to have my sister-in-law and my brother on. The show was a bit glitchy, but it got a lot better towards the second half. And my brother Mark shared his UFO sighting that really got me involved in this field. So that was a fun show. If you get a chance to check it out, all our shows are, of course, archived. I'm delighted to see we have a nice little crowd here already. Very cool. According to our producers, our numbers are still growing massively. So thanks to all of you. We're so happy you could join us. Who do we have here today? We've got some familiar names and some not so familiar. We have AM8370. Thanks for joining us. OG Gook from the UK. OG Guk? Aguk? I don't know, Dolly. Either way, all the way from the UK. So thanks for staying up late.
Yes. Thank you.
We have Cherise. Hello, Cherise.
Hello, Cherise.
Well. Lovely and generous. Namaste. We appreciate your support. You know we do. So thank you. Thank you. Louise.
Hi, Louise. I love you.
Okay. Cherise, thank you so much.
Thank you, sweetie.
Your support of our show really touches my heart. It helps us so much. Thank you, Cherise. So very, very nice of you. We have John all the way from Australia.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good day, mate.
Reaching all over the world. It's very cool. Here's Teresa Levine. Hello, Teresa.
Hi, Teresa.
Oh, the lovely Kay Hansen. I don't feel good today. Oh,
my
dear.
I'm very sorry.
Sending you healing energy.
Absolutely. Yep.
Goodness gracious. Hope you feel better soon. All right. Z Sundragon. Hello.
Z Sun. Hello.
Cosmic Joe. Tim Houston.
Hi.
I love seeing all these familiar names, you guys. It's just very cool.
Yep.
Flea Market Gold.
Flea Market.
I love flea markets, actually. Yep. We have Lenovovo. I'm going to Popeye's Chicken. Very cool. We went to Bojangles the other day, and it was great. Okay. We have Dottie.
Hi, Dottie.
We have Kiara Jade. We have
hello.
We have Randy Terrell and Lee Aralucier.
Hello.
I got that right.
Bonsoir. Yeah.
The lovely Scarlet Fire and Olivia Escamilla. We have Kirby Chamberlain with some high praise. Oh, very kind of you. Hello, Toby. We got Kaleidoscope.
Hi, Kaleidoscope.
We have Patsy Nyla Esme. Hey.
Hello.
All right. Very cool. I'm going to get going, guys, because I could say hi to you forever, and I will. Hi, Stargazer. Hi, Owl Man. Really just touched that you guys can all join us tonight. Hi, Becky. But yeah, let's get going. Chris Cranford, yay.
Hey,
Well, if you guys have any questions for our guest, he's very knowledgeable. Get them in early because we would love to have a chat with you guys and
Yep.
get some questions answered. But let me tell you who our guest is, because he is absolutely an astonishing researcher. Let me put this on the ticker tape, in fact. There it is. We are so pleased, honored, delighted to welcome longtime researcher and author Stan Gordon, who was trained as an electronics technician who specialized in radio communications and worked in the advanced consumer electronics sales field for over 40 years. Has lived in Greensburg, Pennsylvania all his life. His interest in the UFO subject began at age 10. UFOs and other paranormal stuff. In the late 1960s, he acted as the telephone UFO sighting report investigations coordinator for the UFO Research Institute of Pittsburgh. Amazing. In this field for so long. He began field investigations of UFOs and mysterious events in 1965. And this is so interesting, is the primary investigator of the December 9, 1965 UFO crash recovery incident that occurred near Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. Easily one of the top 3 most well-known and I think verified incidents like this in the United States. In 1969, he established a UFO hotline for the public to report UFO sightings for him to investigate, and 1 year later, founded the Westmoreland County UFO Study Group, the first of 3 volunteer research groups which he would establish to investigate UFO sightings and other strange occurrences in Pennsylvania. He is a former Pennsylvania State Director for the Mutual UFO Network and was in fact its first recipient of the MUFON Meritorious Achievement in UFO Investigation Award. That is so cool. He's been involved in investigations of thousands of mysterious encounters across Pennsylvania, and of course, no surprise here, has appeared on numerous and local TV news and documentary shows, including the Sci-Fi Channel and Discovery and History and Fox News. It's been on Unsolved Mysteries, Sightings, Inside Edition, A Current Affair, Creepy Canada. I mean, you name it. He's got some really interesting books that I would highly recommend. Silent Invasion, the Pennsylvania UFO Bigfoot Casebook. Really Mysterious Pennsylvania. Astonishing Encounters, Pennsylvania's Unknown Creatures. Boy, Pennsylvania is got a lot going on. And most recently, Creepy Cryptids and Strange UFO Encounters of Pennsylvania. Let's just bring our esteemed guest on. We have a really interesting situation. It's going to be audio only, but we're hoping that that's okay with you guys. Hey, Stan, can you hear me?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me on the program, Preston. It's good to hear your voice.
Hey, it's an
thank
honor.
you.
Yeah. I followed you for a very long time, so super excited. You're hugely influential in this field, so it's a real honor. And I've got so many questions, but I thought I would start by asking, as I warned you before the show, how did you get involved in this field? You kind of mentioned it a little bit in your bio. What a bio, by the way. Man, oh man.
Well, I got involved in this when I was a 10-year-old kid who was interested in electronics and science. I was building crystal radios back in those days and gathering insects to look under my microscope. And I happened to hear a radio show talking about unusual occurrences, haunted houses, flying saucers, and it caught my attention. I was skeptical but interested, so I went to my local Greensburg library and started reading all the books on the subject. I began to cut articles out of the paper, make scrapbooks of reports of UFOs or other unusual events in the newspapers. And I was 16 years old when the incident happened near Kecksburg, PA, in December 1965. I started documenting that case that was breaking on the news in the Pittsburgh area, and I've been out in the field ever since. And it'll probably be of interest to a lot of your listeners that I worked on thousands of UFO cases and hundreds of Bigfoot and cryptid cases, and I have never personally seen a Bigfoot or a UFO.
No.
Wow. You're kidding me.
Kind of thought you.
I've seen a lot of evidence over the years, and saw different patterns, but I've never seen one personally, even though I'm pretty certain that I chased one in the dark through a cornfield in 1973 when we had this massive Bigfoot UFO outbreak that I'm sure we'll be talking about.
I know about
yeah.
the 1973 outbreak. Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, that's very, very interesting. So, gosh, I don't even know where to start. How about, I mean, what do you have anything you want to start with, or shall I just throw some ideas out there?
Well, let me give you a little history, and a lot of what I'm going to tell you is very interesting but very detailed, so it takes a little bit of time to go through some of these cases. So in 1969, I set up a hotline for the public to report UFO sightings. Within a week or two, there's so many calls coming into my home day and night, I knew I couldn't handle this all on my own, so I decided I was going to try to establish a research group to investigate these incidents. So in 1970, I found the first of 3 groups that for many years would investigate unusual incidents across Pennsylvania. The first group was the Westmoreland County UFO Study Group. It started in Greensburg. We moved to the Pittsburgh area, and I was amazed who got involved in the groups. We had scientists, engineers, technicians, police officers, former military specialists who volunteer their time around our full-time jobs to investigate these cases. And by 1973, I'd extended to cover the whole state of Pennsylvania. So we were set up that we could respond to many cases within minutes to hours to days later when we were able to. And we did many, many cases. And we were so lucky that we were set up by 1973. Here in Pennsylvania, and you can go online and read many newspaper stories about it. There's a big index in my Silent Invasion book on this particular, what we're going to talk about now. First, we had the biggest UFO outbreak in history anywhere, I'm sure, in the country, probably in the world, 1973. There were hundreds and hundreds of UFO reports coming in. And first of all, let me tell you this, Preston, from the time I've been out in the field to the present day, when I continue to get reports on a regular basis coming in, we always look at these things scientifically and objectively. And even back then, we knew that many UFO sightings were misidentification of natural man-made objects. So a lot of reports are explainable. They continue to be. Starlink satellites, fireball meteors, re-entry of space debris, drones, of course. So there's a lot of things we can explain. Even with Bigfoot sightings, some of them turn out to be hunters in camouflage, large shaggy dogs, bear sightings in Pennsylvania. So we can eliminate a lot of these things, but we're going to talk about things we cannot easily explain, and there's multitudes of incidents. So going back to 1973, many of the UFO sightings come in. Again, there were hundreds of reports coming in. Many of the local newspapers were covering local stories of incidents, some of their local areas, some of it made national news. And so you got to remember now, in 1973, there's no cell phones, no internet, no GPS. It's a whole different time frame. So witnesses really didn't know what other people were reporting, which was actually good for our documentation because we knew people couldn't be making up stories. So you had all these UFO sightings. Many were low-level, large, solid objects below the ground. We had incidents where these things were hovering over cars, pacing vehicles on highways. We had incidents on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. We had landing reports. It was just an amazing time, day and night, just trying to respond to all these UFO cases. But then in the summer of 73, we had the biggest Bigfoot outbreak ever documented. That went on from that time period to early 74. And actually, every year since then, including this year, we've had Bigfoot sightings in Pennsylvania, plus all kind of other cryptid reports. But 73 was an amazing time. There were so many Bigfoot incidents. And again, many times we were on the scene within minutes to hours. And at that point, I was completely, in the 60s when I was investigating Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, I was completely convinced that what we were dealing with was some type of unknown species of animal, some type of creature which science had never confirmed existing. But then things began to turn up in the early 70s, especially 1973, that we began to realize that we're dealing with something that's much, much stranger. And we can go into that. Let's get back to you for a minute.
Yeah, well, I'm very interested in this whole 1973 wave because I know that was Walter Webb wrote a book called Year of the Humanoids.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, when the Pascagoula case happened, the Jeff Greenhaw case, some very high profile cases. So my question to you regarding this 1973 wave was, did it peak in October as we saw with Walter Webb's research?
No, it didn't. It started January 1st and continued all year across the state. And then, as you're correct, we had that big wave of activity that really surfaced in October '73, began to make a lot of national news with the UFO reports. But what was happening here wasn't just the UFO reports. It was a lot of other strange things, including so many Bigfoot sightings. And so many of them were daylight, close range, sometimes more than one creature seen together. But in many instances, our teams would get out there within minutes to hours, and there would be physical evidence at the scene. You would see the animal reactions, which was very intriguing. We've seen that ever since then. You would have some types of, again, physical evidence at the scene. There were patterns beginning to develop, and it got very, very interesting. So at that point, 1973, with all those different Bigfoot reports coming in, they were coming in from many areas of the state. It started a lot in the southwest portion of the state, but over many, many other parts of the state, reports were coming in as well. And this is an all type of weather now, because it went on early '74, so even in the wintertime. So one of the first odd things that turned up was the fact that we get out to some of these areas in the snow, fresh snow, there'd be these very large, very unusual looking footprints with big strides between them that would go for a distance and then abruptly just stop. There was no way that could be fabricated. I had anthropologists in my group, we had forensic people, and it was impossible. And you probably have heard now, these kind of reports are going all over the country. So that was one of the first things that showed up. And then it started getting stranger and stranger. So once again, this is from different areas, but behind what was in the Green Gate Mall here in Greensburg, it was a lot of wooded area. Well, let me tell you the story that happened in that area that started this whole thing, even though later on we found out that there were earlier incidents prior to this. But it was an incident that occurred July 31st, 1973. I got the call on a week later, August the 7th. This man was in his home shaving. He always shaved early because he got up early for work. It was a warm night. He's in the bathroom shaving when he begins to smell this funny, rotten odor. He turns around, he's looking at the window, and here's these two huge glowing red eyes staring at him, but the window's 8 feet off the ground. He had several big dogs out there. They didn't make a sound. And he ran to the house, started yelling. Some of the other people came out, and they smelled the odor. Whatever was in the window was gone. Well, this fellow was so shaken, he ended up in the hospital. So he got out August the 7th. I contacted him, and I went out to interview him that day. He was still physically upset and shaken over what happened. But I found out that several weeks before, some of the local boys decided to take a shortcut over to the mall through the woods, and they heard this commotion. They thought it was a deer. They started throwing rocks in to scare out the deer. But if there wasn't a deer, it was about a 7, 8 foot tall, hairy creature that walked across the road up behind the house. So I was able to interview some of those boys, and we got permission to go look around on the property. Several of the kids followed me up to the area, and I remember that the area up there on the top of that hill was not very good, conducive for footprints, but I looked around for quite a while, and I was about ready to hang it up for the day when I happened to look down, and here's this partial track, and then one complete print of the most unusual footprint I had ever seen. And these kids came over and said, "What kind of animal can make a footprint like that?" It was 13 inches long, 8 inches wide, and clearly three-toed. So I got on the radio. By the way, I had set up a two-way radio dispatch system in my home you may have seen pictures of it, which was pretty advanced for that day. And I set up this dispatch system so we could send some of the investigators out of the scene very quickly. So I got on the radio. One of my helpers came out. We took photographs and measurements and made a cast of the footprint. And while we're there, we get a radio call that one of our members north of Pittsburgh that morning was investigating a Bigfoot incident where something 9 foot tall was looking in a structure, and the police found very large, unusual footprints up there. That was the beginning of that event. So I'll put it back to you for a minute.
Yeah, well, I've got a bunch of questions about all of everything you just said. And my first question would be regarding these three-toed footprints. Were you able to correlate those directly to a Bigfoot, or do you think this is some other creature?
No, we had multitudes of three-toed tracks being shown, but also five-toed tracks showing up around the same time. It's very complex, this whole thing. A lot of people are unaware of it. Many researchers I was in touch with in the 70s, all around the country and around the world, especially in the Pacific Northwest and California, those places, they were also getting Bigfoot reports with three-toed footprints. And in many parts of the country, both of them have shown up, even four-toed tracks. But three- and five-toed tracks are not that uncommon. They continue to be reported in areas here. We got some very good pictures of them in the last few years from different areas that people had submitted to me. And so, yeah, we have these kind of tracks. And like I'm saying, you're going to start hearing some things that are very strange and unusual. I remember talking to a hunter several years ago who, in a wooded area, came across what appeared to be a track of several different creatures walking together in the woods. Some of them were five-toed and some were three-toed.
All right, I have a big question for you. All right. How many reports of humanoid interaction did you get from the UFOs starting January 1st, 1973? How many people told you that they saw ETs up close and personal?
Well, not ET close, but have I had this kind of reports? Yes, over the years. But that January was a UFO sighting, and the UFO sightings continued all year with reports throughout the state.
But not a lot of humanoid reports? Other than Bigfoot?
Not that many in 73. It was more Bigfoot stuff. But, I was one of the first in the country to look into missing time and reported abduction cases here in Pennsylvania. And there was quite a lot of them. And, the big problem is with these cases, you can spend days, weeks, months, or years on one case. And we did the best we could because we're just overwhelmed with multitudes of reporters coming in all the time. I can tell you that, just from memory, some of those people were very credible. Some had important backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I found out was that as time went on, some of these experiences these people were reporting became a part of their different patterns. Sometimes their children would begin to experience things, and then their grandchildren now. And but this is where it gets really complicated and more interesting with some of the cryptid and Bigfoot stuff that I uncovered. Because one, a person can be in the right place at the right time and just have a one-time Bigfoot encounter, UFO encounter, cryptid encounter. And that's what it is for many people. But then there's another group of people, and I'm in touch with many of these people today, and believe me, some of these are really interesting people. Some have important positions. They call me when different things are occurring to them, and they don't even know the other people that live within miles of them having the same experiences for years. There's one woman, I'm still in touch with her, probably for over, I'm guessing 45 years now. She was a young girl, a little girl that was missing at the time. There was a big search for her here in Westmoreland County, and they found her standing in the middle of the field where they had already searched. And she said, I was here the whole time. From the time she was very young, she began to have paranormal encounters, I think ghostly apparitions, as I recall. As time went on, she would have UFO encounters with Bigfoot, orbs. We'll talk a lot about these orbs later because it's really important what's going on with these orbs you're not hearing about. She would have cryptid encounters, and then later her children had these experiences, and now her grandchildren. And lots of times it goes back even to older generations, grandparents as well. So that's very, very common.
Wow, that's so interesting because we see that pattern certainly with ETs. I didn't realize that was also a Bigfoot thing. Wow.
Yeah, and some of these people also have had missing time abduction cases, and some of them believe that they've had encounters with greys or other type of creatures. But what I'm going to get into now, when I start talking about some of these very strange Bigfoot cases, is that there was a direct UFO Bigfoot connection in some of these cases. But the evidence we found is that these things are not extraterrestrial, but these, for a lack of a better term, they're interdimensional. They have a physical and a non-physical component to them. It's all energy connected. These things come and go. They're here and they're gone, and that's why there's no bodies.
So that goes back to what you said regarding following these tracks and suddenly it disappears?
Yeah. It's all part of it. So one of the other things that started showing up, and I think I started to tell you about this and I got sidetracked. So behind the Green Gate Mall, where there were a lot of reports and where that initial report happened where the guys were in the window, same area. So witnesses were reporting in the afternoons near the railroad tracks, seeing this large, hairy creature standing there maybe 50, 60 feet away that suddenly physically vanished and moments later reappeared maybe 30, 40 feet away in another location. In the next few weeks, from other counties, such as Jamontville and Fayette County, you'll hear me talk a lot about Fayette County, probably one of the most active areas in the country all the time, especially along the Chestnut Ridge. But up there where the big cross is in Jamontville, the big stone monuments up there, people were seeing these creatures standing behind these tall stone monuments and physically vanishing and reappearing a short distance away, and other places as well. That's something these people had no way of knowing about, and this is miles apart, and we're getting the same kind of reports. And then we began to see a pattern. We'd have a UFO sighting in a particular area, and then within minutes, hours, and days later, we'd have a Bigfoot sighting or vice versa. And then it got extremely interesting. Then we had these incidents with UFOs and Bigfoot seen together at the same time and place. And here's where you can get into the really good stuff, but it takes a little bit of time to describe the story to you.
Yeah, well, we've got plenty of time. So, but let me just ask you a few more questions before we get into some of these detailed stories.
Sure.
Regarding these Bigfoot, are people seeing all the same types, or does it are there variations in what people are describing?
Yeah, there was some variations. A lot of them were typical sightings of something 7 to 9 foot tall, generally with long hair hanging off the body, sometimes kind of stooped, no neck, but very often with luminous glowing eyes of different colors, especially like green, red, orange, those type of eyes being reported. Some were taller and thinner, some were shorter and more stocky, more muscular. And then we had other reports. Sometimes we had more than one creature seen together, big ones and smaller ones. Smaller ones about 4 to 5 feet tall. And those reports, by the way, have been reported on and off in Pennsylvania for years, but in the last few years, we're getting an increase in both the taller ones and the smaller ones being seen. And a lot of the reports in the last couple of years in Pennsylvania with Bigfoot, both the smaller ones and the big ones, they're being seen in daylight 50, 60 feet away from people. We're getting very detailed reports.
Do you know if the smaller ones are the ones with the 3 toes?
We can't specifically say which had 3 toes. We can't do that. All we know is that they keep showing up in the same areas where there have been a lot of Bigfoot sightings.
Yeah.
Are they showing up in areas where you would never expect them to be?
Yep. That's an interesting. That's one of the things I was going to bring up. There's a lot of things that don't fit what we thought years ago when they were flesh and blood. So yes, we get many reports from the forested, wooded areas of Pennsylvania, but also we're getting more and more reports over the years in populated areas like suburbs of Pittsburgh, where there's not a lot of woods, where people are having very close Bigfoot sightings, other cryptid reports. And even in the last couple of years now, actually even more than that, last few years, we're getting daylight sightings, low level in the sky. Of course, you've heard about what the government calls tic tacs. I've been dealing with them since the 70s, these long, elongated, metallic, wingless objects just hovering there silently and just disappearing in beautiful afternoons. We're also getting reports of black triangles over populated areas, such as Route 30 outside of Greensburg and Route 30 near Irwin, Pennsylvania, and outside of Pittsburgh. So a lot of these sightings now are taking place at low level in daylight. And if you go to my website, you'll see some photographs of some of these tic tacs.
Wow. So do you think these Bigfoot are sentient? Intelligent?
I couldn't hear the last thing you said. Bigfoot, what?
Do you think they're sentient? Are they intelligent like us?
Well, we can, there's so many aspects of this. We can only theorize. We don't know for sure what we're dealing with. I don't think anybody understands. The more we know about this, I'm telling you, whatever we're dealing with is beyond our present scientific understanding. It is so strange and so unusual. I had my latest book, Creepy Cryptids, with the phenomenon is so strange it protects itself. It is so strange and unusual that nobody understands it. And, a lot of what they were dealing with, the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, was what I was dealing with in the 70s and continue to deal with on a regular basis. But, now I should tell you this, once again, you can be in the right place at the right time to have a Bigfoot or cryptid or UFO or even an orb encounter. We haven't gotten into that yet. And again, it could be anywhere. But there are certain specific geographical locations where the phenomenon is very common. So a lot of these places have a long history of people encountering paranormal type of phenomena, cryptids, UFOs, Bigfoot, a lot of strange stuff. And there are places here in Pennsylvania where this is ongoing. And again, it's all private property. People don't want people to know about it, but there's several of these places that are very active, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that later on.
Yeah, definitely. So much to go into. I have another question that I'm very curious about because, I've done a lot of Bigfoot research myself. Some people report that they, stink to high heaven. Other times people said, no, I didn't smell any odor. So is the odor of Bigfoot something consistent? Do you think this is something that they can intentionally emit? You know what I mean? Kind of like a skunk, or is this just a, what's your take on the whole stinky Bigfoot aspect?
This is something I bring up one of my lectures on this. It very commonly, there is a smell. In many cases, there is not a smell. Even in cases in the last few years of daylight close range, there's no odor whatsoever. My theory is, and again, it's a theory, and I'm telling you, we don't understand it. People talk about portals and different type of gateways and entrance places, and people up in the Chestnut Ridge and other areas claim that they see this at times. That's an area where there's extensive Bigfoot history. Year after year, we're getting Bigfoot encrypted reports, creature reports, UFOs, strange reports already this year up in that area by different people. And these things seem to be able to suddenly appear and disappear. And so I'll give you one interesting story about the smell. Like I said, I have not seen one, but in '73, when all this was going on, especially in Derry Township, I get a call from a police chief, and he asked me to come down to investigate this incident. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you or not, but as this was all going on in '73, and we're covering the whole state of Pennsylvania, and this is starting to make a lot of news, a lot of people were getting pretty shaken in different areas, we were surprised. We began to get referrals from the local news media, but also from the state police and other law enforcement agencies across the state. So we're out there day and night just trying to keep up with all these reports. So this police chief calls me and he said, these two women came to his office, and the woman, and there's a picture of it. I have a picture in my lecture I do of the actual bedroom. She's laying there early morning hours. It's a very warm night, and something awakens her. She turns around. The window's probably only a few feet away from her bed, and this thing rises up and is looking directly at her through the window. She got a good look at the face. She said it was more like a wolf or a dog with luminous eyes and large fang-like teeth. And she ran out of there into her daughter's room, just told her what happened. And a short time later, she goes back to her room, and her daughter starts yelling that she just saw the biggest shadow she had ever seen and heard something bipedal walking by her window. And right about that time, this horrific odor encompasses the whole area and the inside of their home. It smelled terrible. So anyhow, they were hearing rumors. I think it was the next day or so, they heard rumors that the local police had shot and killed this creature. So they wanted to get down and see the creature, what it looked like, if what was going on around their property. That, of course, was a rumor. It wasn't true. So anyhow, the police chief goes up to the house, and he can still smell the smell. So he called me to come down because of the smell. And I enter the home, and yep, you could this was like something that's been dead for a long time, rotten, stinking odor. And it encompassed that home for several days.
Wow. That's, yeah, I mean, because I don't think we have any primates that have, scent glands that they can control. I mean, you can certainly go to the zoo and smell a gorilla, but.
Well, here's my theory. My theory is, again, we're only surmising, we're only theorizing because we don't understand what we're dealing with. The interdimensional terminology may not be accurate, but that's what we're using right now. And my feeling is that whatever we're dealing with the smell, it has something to do with the process of these things coming and going in and out of our dimension under those conditions.
That makes sense because you hear odors associated with ETs coming in and out sometimes too. So yeah, maybe there's something to that. Very interesting. Okay, I want to hear more high strangeness stories, but I do have a quick question. What's the tallest Bigfoot report you've gotten? How tall can these guys get?
Well, generally 7 to 9 foot tall is very common. Again, there's some smaller ones, but I had some incidents over the years which were really well documented. I had one case near West Newton, PA, which has a lot of history. Back in the 60s, that down there they have a little town called Lower, PA. They had what they called the Lower Monster. They were seeing the 7 to 8 foot tall white-haired Bigfoot down there, and they were finding large footprints down there. So that's what they called it, the Lower Monster. But West Newton, this was a very, almost looked like a jungle-like swamp area, which is odd in Pennsylvania, but that's what it is down there. And anyhow, this lady's back porch faces the swamp. She had left some plants out. Early morning hours was going to be a frost. So she got up early, and I think there were 2 dogs she took out with her on the back porch. As soon as she walks out, here's this huge Bigfoot standing up right on the side of the porch, like about 3 feet away from her. And there was a tree there with some branches hanging over, and the top of the head of this thing was hitting the top of that branch. And she screamed, it screamed, and ran off, and she ran the house, and the dogs ran in the house as fast as they could. And I went out there the next day and measured it. It was 12 feet off the ground.
Wow. All right. Well, that's pretty tall. Amazing. Okay. Yeah, well, let's get into some of the specific high strangeness stories. I know you've got so much information, so I'll just kind of turn it over to you, and we'll pop in questions when we have them.
Okay, well, there's one case that really stands out, really 2. I'll tell you about both of them. So it's October 25th, 1973. There's multiple UFO reports come in across the state on my hotline. But then it was about 10:30 at night, I get a call from a state trooper from the Uniontown State Police Barracks in Fayette County. He just came back from investigating this incident. He said, I think there's a good chance of something stood up on the farm. Can you get a team up here as soon as you can? Well, it's 10:30 at night, and we're a pretty good distance away, but we get our team together, and we find our way up to Fayette County. There was no GPS. It took us quite a while to find where we were going, and we met a key witness and his father. Anyhow, to go back to the story, give me a short part of the story. We could talk for hours, basically what happened just in this event. So anyhow, there's 15 eyewitnesses observed this very large red orange size, about 100 feet in diameter, sphere about 100 feet off the ground, hovering and beginning to move downward towards the pasture. So the farmer's son, if his dad owns the property, he'd be the adult. He's coming down to visit his family, and he sees this thing in the sky, and the people standing outside watching this thing. So he decides he's going to go up to the neighbor's house, which would give him a better view. At that neighbor's house, there were 2 young boys. They're all watching this thing, and they decide they want to go see what the thing is up in the field. So before heading up to the pasture, they stopped over his dad's farm. So the son grabs a 30-06, pretty powerful weapon, and a handful of ammunition. In that ammunition, he had 2 tracer bullets, which he didn't realize at the time. So they make their way up towards the farm, and one feature, he said, will be of interest to some of your listeners. They angled the truck with the headlights on, but they're watching the headlights, and something's causing them to dim, like they're losing power. That's an interesting thing. You've heard that about some other UFO cases over the years. So anyhow, they find their way up to the hill. They make their way up there to the pasture, and they couldn't believe what they're seeing. About 250 feet away, this huge object is now on the ground or right above it. It's no longer a complete sphere. It's like a half a sphere, like a big white dome, making this loud whirling sound that's illuminating the whole field. So they're standing there in amazement watching this thing. And then it gets more interesting. Then their attention is drawn. There's a barbed wire fence about 75 feet away. And along that barbed wire fence, walking their direction, are these 2 huge Bigfoot-type creatures. The one in front's about 8 feet tall. The one right behind is about 7 feet tall. They're both moving in a kind of a stoop fashion, slowly, one behind the other, going post to post. They have no neck. Their arms are so long they hang below the knees almost to the ground. They have large, luminous, glowing green eyes and are making this whining, baby crying sound. The one boy is so scared he runs out of the field. Then the other young kid starts yelling, the adult, shoot him, shoot him. The guy takes his first shot over top of their head. No response. That was a tracer bullet. But now when he fires the second bullet, which was also the second tracer over their head, it got very interesting. When he fires that tracer, the largest of the 2 creatures reaches out as to grab that tracer, It makes a loud whining, crying noise, and that huge luminous object in the field vanishes. It doesn't take off and accelerate to the sky. It just disappears. The creatures at that point, they turn around and now beginning to walk back along the fence line towards the woods. At that point, now he's firing his live ammo from his 30-06 into them with no effect whatsoever. He said, I've been hunting all my life. I know I hit them. And he said he just kept going with no indication of any problems whatsoever. So they ran back to their truck and went back to the house and told them what happened. They took the neighbors to a neighbor's house and called the state police. And anyhow, the trooper arrives 45 minutes later. The witness says, look, just forget about it. You're going to think I'm crazy. And the trooper said, look, we had a report of 2 similar creatures on the mountain the night before. I have to investigate the report. So they go up in a patrol car and they're looking around for evidence. And I interviewed the trooper. And he said, when we got on scene, the area where the object had been on the ground was self-luminescent and glowing, about 100 feet or more in diameter. He said the farm animals wouldn't go anywhere near it. And he said, if I had a newspaper, I'm sure I could have sat down within that area and read from the glow, read the print on the newspaper. This is all the short part of the story. Other things happened right after that. They went back to the barracks, and I was told both this trooper and the witness taken 2 separate rooms. They were separately interviewed. Then they called me and sent up my team. And again, I'm not going to take the time to go in all this stuff because we have so much to talk about. We could spend hours just in this one case. But things got much, much stranger, and it is just incredible what turned out. Now we knew that we're dealing with something that is much stranger than an unknown animal. And there was a long investigation on it. You might remember the name Dr. Berthold Schwartz, a psychiatrist. Do you remember that name?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well, Dr. Schwartz and I became very good friends. He came up and spent a week up here interviewing all the people and went away completely convinced these people are all telling the truth. And remind me, or I can do it now, but remind me later to tell you about the mystery men showed up at the property after this happened. But we didn't know about it until the 1980s because he thought they were part of my group.
Oh, all right.
Do you want me to tell you now, or do you want to hold off till later?
Yeah, go ahead. I want to hear it.
Okay. So anyhow, there was a long investigation on this case. The state police were involved in it. And anyhow, Dr. Schwartz came up and spent a week up here. And so anyhow, years later in the 80s, it was not unusual for me to do a follow-up with some witnesses to some important cases just to talk to them to see if anything had happened. We had never used hypnosis with this fella on that night because of some of the things that were going on, and Dr. Schwartz didn't recommend it back then. So here's the mid-'80s, and we're considering that possibility because I had specialists on my team that could do proper hypnosis, like psychologists and whatever. Anyhow, we go and meet with him and haven't talked to him for a while, and we tell him that, hey, we're considering now doing some hypnosis with you. And he looked at myself and my associate real strange. He said, why do you want to hypnotize me again? And we said, well, what are you talking about? He said, well, back at that time, you have different teams coming up, interviewing me and do things like that. And he said, he said, I thought these 2 fellows were part of your group somehow. He said, one was in a dark suit. The other was in the Air Force uniform. The man in the Air Force uniform carried a briefcase. And anyhow, they wanted him to explain in detail all the information he can remember from that night, what he saw, what the creatures looked like, what the UFO looked like. And then they hypnotized him. And, before they got the hypnosis, sir, after he told his story to them, the Air Force officer opens his briefcase and pulls out photographs of Bigfoot UFOs, and he wanted that witness to tell them what looked similar to what he saw. And then they hypnotized him, and they thanked him very much. They said they believed his story, and they said, we'll be in touch. And, of course, he never contacted them again. We tried to follow up, but there was no way to follow whoever they were, find out who they were. So you got to remember, Project Blue Book closed down in January 1970. This is 1973, and the government was reportedly not involved in UFO investigations. However, that's another story. But
I have a big question, real quick.
Interesting aspect of the case.
Yeah. Real quick. There are 15 military bases in Pennsylvania. Was this near one of them?
You got to remember now, it's 1960. It's 1973, and there was military facilities around those areas. You know, back in the 60s, you had a lot of bases because of Vietnam. So you had a lot of armories around, and there were
Right.
National Guard bases, things like that. But
Right.
not right in that immediate area that I'm aware of.
You know, in the 50s, there was a nuclear silos up there in an underground bunker that is now nuclear proof, and it's still there. The silos are gone, but there was a bunker there. Do you know where that was?
There were stories about different. I was aware of some stories going back to the 60s that people told me there were underground military installations.
Yes, they're all over. I'm not kidding.
Area
Yeah. Yep.
in other areas, but no, we didn't know where they were, and we never saw them. But people were saying that they were aware of some of these type of facilities.
Yeah, Pennsylvania had in 1973, there was really a lot of very hot behind the scenes military things going on. And I'm not surprised that you had a wave of it.
You cut out on me. I lost what you were saying.
It is not surprising to me that y'all had a wave in 73 and part of 74, because there were a lot of things going on with the military bases and underground facilities in those years. And it does not surprise me. What does surprise me is that Bigfoot's attached to it. And I've seen and heard reports about Bigfoots being associated with UFOs too, all over the place, all over the world, as a matter of fact. And it just seems like you had a ton of them. Incredible ton.
Also in 73, you know, again, we talk about the major UFO flap. It started about in October of 73 around the country. Here in Pennsylvania, again, where it's going on all year long. But there were also some other states that were having a smaller amount but similar type of Bigfoot incidents with UFOs. One of them was Tennessee. A lot of people don't even know about.
That's true. Yeah.
But I was in touch with investigators and reporters from other states that were dealing with the same type of thing that was going on. But it was nothing even close to the amount of activity here in Pennsylvania.
Wow, that's so amazing to me.
Well, then I'm going to tell you a more interesting story. There
All right.
are many. But here's the one case that convinced me that we're dealing with something that is well beyond the flesh and blood creature.
Well, wait, before you...
February 6, 1974. We're up in the mountains of southwest Pennsylvania, and this lady lived in her little cabin home deep in the mountains, lived in the woods, all right, knows the animals well, was a good shot. And it was a normal night. She's sitting there watching TV. She began to hear this noise, commotion on her front porch. She had some empty pop cans, soda cans out there. Something was knocking the cans around. So she thought, well, a couple weeks before, there was a pack of wild dogs that came through, and she thought, I bet the dogs are back. So she thought, you know what? I'll just grab my 16-gauge double-barrel shotgun, I'll load one chamber, and I'll go out and I'll fire over their heads, and I'll scare them away. So she does that. She loads her shotgun. She walks up towards the front. She gets ready to hit the switch. She hits the switch, turns on the front light. She steps out. There's no dogs there. 6 feet in front of her is a 7-foot-tall Bigfoot with gray hair that put his arm straight up over his head when they put the light on. And how did she respond? She aimed her weapon at it, pulled the trigger, and fired right into it.
Oh, my God.
Bright flash of light, she said, like a flash on a camera, and that physically saw-looking creature disappeared right in front of her. And then there's more of the story. So her in-laws lived 100 feet away. They heard the gunshot, and they called and asked her what she was shooting at. She tried to explain to them. Her son-in-law reportedly grabbed the sidearm, started walking down that dirt road to her cabin home, and was surrounded by 4 or 5 hairy people with eyes like coals of fire, starting shooting at him randomly. And around the same time, there's this large luminous object, so like a great big Christmas ornament, hovering over the trees at the same time. That's when they called the state police for help. Well, some of your listeners remember the time period. It's February 1974. There's a big national trucker strike across the country in Pennsylvania. A lot of people remember the gas rationing. And because of the violence on the highway, you had National Guard and state police patrolling together. You had members of both groups that responded to this incident. I couldn't get gas, so I couldn't get up there early next morning. But anyhow, I talked to the primary investigating officer, and he said, by the time they found the place, everything was over. But he said, something very unusual and strange happened up here. He said the witnesses were very credible. They were visibly shaken. They gave great detail about what they saw. But he said what convinced him were the animal reactions. And he said when they got on scene, there was quite a number of different animals on the farm. They were all very nervous, but he said they had, I think it was, they had several think it was 5 big dogs, including a Eskimo Spitz and German Shepherd. When they go out on scene, the dogs wouldn't make a sound. They would not bark. They wouldn't move. I remember him telling me one of them, I think it was the Eskimo Spitz, I think, was in a cage. He opened it up. That dog wouldn't even move. He should have ripped his arm off. Wouldn't move, wouldn't bark. And that's something you can't fabricate. I said years ago, you can fool people, you can't fool the animals. Now, when I got up early the next morning, all the dogs were barking as normal. But that's just a part of the story. That's when we knew now we're dealing with something that is far beyond flesh and blood.
Wow, amazing. So is Pennsylvania a draw for them? I mean, why so many encounters in Pennsylvania? Is it because you're out there researching and bringing the subject to light, or do you think other areas are as active? Because Pennsylvania.
Well, there's no doubt. Many other states are reporting incidents, but Pennsylvania has always had a lot. But you've got to remember now, so the stories of Bigfoot in Pennsylvania go back to Native Americans. And there's many, many newspaper accounts that talk about both Bigfoot and UFO sightings in the 1800s, late 1800s, across Pennsylvania. So they've been around for years and years. But you also got to remember, so I set my hotline up in 1969. My phone still never stopped ringing, and the email reports come in almost every day on current and past reports. So it was one of the only places in the country that you could report a sighting confidentially, and somebody would investigate it. And that's, we had an input for information nobody else did for these kind of reports, especially in those days. And so that's why we were getting all the reports, because they were coming into different sources that were referring to my team to investigate.
All right. Wow. Yeah, because I think Pennsylvania is the biggest producer of Bigfoot reports in the U.S. next to California.
I have no doubt it is. You know, a lot of people, you know, the whole thing is there's no databases that have all the information, because I'm in touch with many other researchers across the state. They all get reports. I get lots of reports. And even though I publish a lot of these on my website and I share them with other researchers that we're in touch with, it's just the fact that a lot of these other sources not even aware of these kind of reports.
All right. And it's not just Bigfoot, is it? There's dogmen and...
No, UFOs are the same way. I mean, you have no idea how many reports come in all the time, including this year. And once again, yes, we can explain some of the reports, but there's some cases that are very, very intriguing. Like I said, in more recent years, even this year, we're getting interesting reports. I think it was about 2 weeks ago now, maybe 3 weeks ago now, a man called me. I interviewed him. He got what appears to be a really good video about 15 miles outside of Pittsburgh in the afternoon of a large black solid disc, somewhat disc shaped. There's leaves and there's trees in the pictures. So he's done all the phone data. I have a very good photo analyst right now that's examining that, and we're waiting to see what goes on. It was quite a long video, so it's interesting. But these things are going on all the time. It's nonstop. You know, I do a lot of lectures. I did one last weekend. I was up there. I was invited to speak at Marionville, that big Bigfoot event, probably one of the biggest in the country, and thousands and thousands of people there. I can't begin to tell you how many people came to talk to me, sharing their recent and past reports about Bigfoot, cryptids, and UFOs and orbs. And none of them, I think almost none of them reported to anybody.
Well, so do you get it? Do you see a connection when it comes to Bigfoot with, you know what I mean?
Mind speak.
Yeah. Do you get reports where Bigfoot is speaking telepathically to
Well,
witnesses?
I'll give you an interesting story. I'm aware of a lot of these things. Of the hundreds of Bigfoot cases I investigated, these type of incidents are extremely rare. Have they occurred? Yes. And the people I talked to, a lot of them were reluctant to even talk to me about the Bigfoot sighting, but they were even more reluctant to tell me about the experience they were having where they felt that these creatures were trying to mentally communicate with them. And I told you earlier, I've never seen a Bigfoot or UFO, but I was a witness to this incident I'm going to tell you about. So in the mid-'80s, this is between Derry and Latrobe, along the areas of Chestnut Ridge, which once again is very active. Several landowners were contacting me because this Bigfoot was coming down from the top of the ridge down towards their property and scaring their animals. So my team went out to interview these people, and they were all very interesting, very credible people. But there was one person in the group who was reluctant to say it, but they told me, they said, I don't understand it. I don't know why it's happening, but it seems at times that this thing is trying to communicate with me. So we're going on with our interview and talking to people, and this person says, this thing is telling me right now that tomorrow morning over the town of Homer City, Pennsylvania, Indiana County, so we're in Westmoreland, we're probably 15, 20 miles away from Indiana County, Homer City. She said, this thing is saying that tomorrow morning over Homer City, early morning hours, there'll be this UFO hovering right over the town. Well, lo and behold, during the early morning hours over Homer City, multiple people were calling into a local, like fire department and some other agency, I assume, about this very loud, strange sound, like something was right over the town, but they couldn't see it. It was so strange they called the fire department out. How do you explain that one?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the high strangeness aspects of all of this. So what about how Bigfoot, sounds, their vocalizations? Because I've heard everything from them sounding like a woman screaming bloody murder to, well, you mentioned crying like a baby, but roars, whistling. Do you hear all these kinds of things?
Okay, so what I knew in 73 was these creatures made at least 4 specific sounds, like a woman in pain screaming, a baby crying, a high-pitched whistle, and like somebody with very heavy, deep breathing like they had asthma. However, I also found out from different instances, these creatures could mimic any sound, including human sounds.
Oh, wow. Well, that's interesting. I don't know that I've heard that before, but it kind of makes sense. That's kind of creepy, actually.
Well, there's a lot of it that's creepy people have heard about. The other thing that's really interesting is the electromagnetic effects involved with Bigfoot that a lot of people never heard about. And I'm sure you remember this back in probably the late 40s, probably early 50s, 60s. You hear reports of these large metallic UFOs, these discs, hovering close to vehicles. And sometimes when they are close by, the engine will begin to lose power, the headlights would dim, the object would take off, and the headlights would get brighter, and then we'd go back to normal. But there's similar reports with Bigfoot. They're not that common. We've had some in Pennsylvania. There's other states over the years that have had these incidents. But sometimes when a Bigfoot walks close to a vehicle, once again, the engine begins to lose power, the creature walks off, and the engine goes back to normal.
How do you? What's your theory with that?
Well, once again, here's the thing. Here's the pattern I found years ago. Many close-range, low-level UFO sightings, many encounters with Bigfoot and other cryptids often occur in the vicinity of energy sources. So you have many sightings around high-tension power lines, power plants, bodies of water, railroad tracks, gas wells, gas lines, all kind of radio towers, cell phone towers, communication towers, broadcast towers, bodies of water. There is no doubt there's an energy connection to so many of these reports.
Wow, have you had people like try to take pictures of them and their camera not work? Because that turns up with
that was just what I was about to tell you. That is very, very common. It's been going on for years, been increasing more and more in recent years. So this goes back to cell phones, good high quality night vision equipment with professionals out there and told me everything was great, and then within a very short, quick time, the fully charged batteries completely drained. Other equipment, people try to take pictures of both UFOs and sometimes cryptid stuff, and the camera malfunctions. I had one guy about 2 years ago that there was a triangle hovering over his head fairly low. He's recording it on his cell phone camera. He has him in the video record mode. He sees the image on the screen of the camera. When he plays it back, there's no video.
Yeah. ET craft emit electromagnetic pulses. It's like an EMP, and it will knock out any electronics, any type of batteries, that kind of thing. It'll just kill the power in it temporarily. And sometimes if they stay with their emitters facing at an object for too long, it'll totally kill it. It'll knock it out for hours before it can come back online. And so, yeah, and if they're low flying, that's the worst part of it. That's when you're in the most line of them knocking your power out, And if they're flying away right away when they see the power go out and they leave, it's because they're trying to spare you the effect of the craft on you, and your equipment.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's all kind of theories about it. I've talked to people with film crews that are out doing documentaries, and all of a sudden their cameras are malfunctioning, their batteries are completely drained of power, and it's something that's going on more and more.
Yeah.
Well, we have every reason to believe that these are physical beings in terms of, I mean, we've got hair samples, right? And blood samples and.
Yep.
But once again, there is a physical and a non-physical aspect of these things. Sometimes, just like the creature the lady was 6 feet away from, was a fully solid-looking creature that she thought was a living, huge, hair-covered creature that she fires into with a 16-gauge double shotgun to one chamber. There's a bright flashlight, and it's gone. Also, there are many reports we have of these things. For example, one, not walking from the side of a road into the road and being there. We have incidents where these things just suddenly appear out of nowhere right in front of the car. They see them from head to toe at close range, and they just vanish. We have other instances, and again, this is not just Pennsylvania. I've heard some of these reports from other researchers around the country as well. And in some cases, the creatures look physically solid, but sometimes part of the body is transparent or out of focus. And then we have other cases where the body, you can see the outline that's more misty or foggy. And there's other instances where these things are not only running extremely fast, but they're gliding right above the road at a high rate of speed. There's more to this than meets the eye, and I'm telling you, that's why there's no bodies.
Yeah. See, okay, so I'm going to bring something up. All right. I know that our government has a lot of capabilities from back engineered stuff. All right. And I think they started using a lot of it all the way back in the early 70s, even the 60s somewhat. And I think some of what you're seeing might be back engineered technology to show you something that you think is there and it's not. And that's why they disappear. I also know that any black triangle or black disc that you see is back engineered, not ET, it's us and our technology. So it's like,
I can tell you this, I investigated multitudes of triangle sightings, many of these cases for years and years.
Yeah.
And you've got to understand too, the government has hundreds of miles of restricted airspace where they do experimental type flights.
Exactly.
The reports we've had of these triangles, even in daylight, they're hovering right over top of people's heads. They're overpopulated areas. They're very low to the ground. And if this is something so secretive, experimental, they're not going to take a chance of doing this so commonly over populated areas. But I do believe that, yes, at times people are seeing some experimental aircraft, but not nearly the type of reports. And also, you've got to look at the fact that a lot of these sightings go back many years, going way back from the 1890s up to the present with UFOs, the Native Americans. And I used to be invited to some Native American special ceremonies years ago. And I had a chance to talk to some as Native Americans, and they told me about their family histories encountering Bigfoot. And you know what they all saying is that these things are more spiritual in nature. They're not a physical thing. They're attached to the forest, but they're also not a physical animal. Or something much more unusual.
Yeah. I've got lots of reports of that. But here's my next question, because people might see a Bigfoot run across the road or hear it in the forest. But then there's other scattered reports, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this, of people who say they've been attacked or kidnapped or even helped, their lives saved. So what do you think of these guys in terms of benevolence versus hostility, the Bigfoot?
Well, I can just tell you this. Of the hundreds of Bigfoot sightings I've had in Pennsylvania, these things, generally when they're seen, they run off. That on occasion they'll throw medium-sized like boulders or tree branches towards people. But for them to come after somebody and physically attack them, that is not common whatsoever in Pennsylvania. Have I heard those reports from other parts of the country? I've heard them, but I'm just telling you, the case I've had here, that's not consistent. I've talked to other researchers in other states, and they said also that's not consistent.
Yeah, I agree. It's exceedingly rare. But what about rock throwing? Because we know with primates, that is primate behavior. Well, we do it.
Yeah, well, that's what I just said. They do throw medium-sized boulders towards people. I've had these things on the shore, throwing them on people in canoes and boats right off the shore. And so we know that that's been going on for a long time. Whether it's the fact that they want to keep them out of certain territories or not come after them, who knows? But that's been reported.
Wow, very, very interesting. So are you getting more than just reports of Bigfoot? What about like elves or little people or goat man or dog man?
We've had many type of reports. I go into some of these, some of my writings, and a lot of this stuff's on my website too. You can look at. But we've had everything from we get more and more Thunderbird sighting reports. We get Black Panther sightings. We've had small, luminous, glowing, gliding entities. Back in 2017, we had an interesting outbreak. I talk about it in my more recent book, Creepy Cryptids. But I got a call from a police officer, and he said, I just had the weirdest experience of my life. And he said, I'm on this dark road, which I patrol often, and there's a luminous, looks like a ball of light on the ground. So we're going to talk about orbs. We haven't gotten into that yet. This is not an orb, even though it's round and it's luminous. And he said, I'm watching this thing on the ground, and I patrol there, and I never saw any artificial lighting around that area. He said, suddenly, this globe goes straight up, and he realizes this is the head of a tall, skinny, sickly-looking humanoid hairless creature.
Huh.
And he said, it's illuminating the upper part of the body. And he said, it turned, and he said, I've never seen it move and run so fast. I haven't, and it's gone. And I've had Bigfoot witnesses describe the same thing. So he pulls his cruiser up, puts a spotlight on, there's no tracks there. So it was a very interesting case. Within the next couple of weeks in other areas of the state, we're getting more reports of these hairless, sickly-looking, grayish, long-limbed humanoid creatures. And they were fascinating. And then the next year, up in another county outside of Pittsburgh, a man calls me, and I was at the house. And he said, I live in the woods, which he did. He said, I know deer. I work with these things up around there. And he said, I know what they sound like. And this one evening, he was up in the property, and he hears these bipedal tracks, but it didn't sound right, didn't sound human-like, and scared him a little. So he decided to go down to his house. So he's sitting there in the kitchen about 8 to 10 feet from the window, which had no curtains on. And here he sees this, once again, sickly-looking, hairless humanoid thing bent down on all fours with glowing yellow eyes staring at him. He turned around to grab a pistol or a gun, and as he turned around, the thing was moving around the side of the house and gone. And he said it took him quite a while to ever go outside again. So those are the kind of reports that are going on. And then you begin to hear these reports all over the country of something similar.
Well, yeah, I've heard people describing those as crawlers or something. I'm not sure they're necessarily ETs, as we would think of them.
We don't know what these things are. And I do not think, I've said years ago, there's more than one origin for the unknown category of UFO mystery. And I'm not saying Bigfoot is extraterrestrial. That's not what we're seeing here. I do believe that the government has recovered craft and bodies that were not of human origin. I believe it's a lot of these objects, especially in the 60s, a lot of the cases I investigated were amazing. A large solid object below the ground, sometimes with small little humanoid creatures or other creatures that look very human-like. There was a lot of those reports in the 60s a lot of people didn't even know about. So I think that we're dealing with two different things, but a lot of what we're dealing with, again, has a physical and a non-physical component to it. Both the Bigfoot and some of these other cryptids, and I'll tell you another story in a few minutes, but some of the UFO reports we've gotten all over the country near Pennsylvania, we have daylight sightings of low level of what appear to be solid objects suddenly appear, they change from one form into another, and then they're gone. They do characteristics that are similar to even what some of the creatures are talking about, the cryptids are reporting. And that's why you have very little physical evidence of some UFOs, and that's why you don't have any bodies with all these different creatures that people are seeing. So something else that's not that common, but people are probably unaware of, but sometimes a Bigfoot accompanies another cryptid. And one of them is really interesting, are Black Panther sightings here in Pennsylvania. So we're not talking about cougars, mountain lions, that's a whole different story. We know those are physical animals. They still continue to report them, even though, yes, there's a lot of misidentifications. I agree with the Game Commission. People are seeing things at times. It's not a mountain lion, but sometimes they are. I made very good casts of paw prints when police called my teams out to investigate mountain lions years ago. There's very good videos of them. There's pictures of them. A lot of people have taken. That's a whole different story. But the black panthers, what these sightings are similar to black leopards or black jaguars, not common in this part of the world. They've been seen in Pennsylvania for years and years. And even in recent years of seeing them. They're also seeing them not just in the wooded areas, but more populated areas.
Yeah, that could be idiots who buy them when they're young and they get out of control and they let them move.
The Bigfoot at close range. So in February 1983, deep in the mountains of Pennsylvania, guy's coming home, his car's overheating. He pulls into his driveway. He goes inside to get a can of antifreeze. He comes back out, he's putting antifreeze in the car. A short time later, he hears this loud growl behind him, and he looks, and about 20 feet away, here's this large black house cat on the ground growling at him. Well, out there in the country where he is, there's a lot of cats roaming around. He didn't think much about it. He goes back, he's putting more antifreeze in the car. A few minutes later, he hears a louder growl, and he said, I couldn't believe what I saw. I turn around, and that big house cat has now physically grown to twice its size. And he threw the can at it. It growled loud and started walking outside where it was all lit up on the outside area. He ran into his house to get his pistol. He said he came out a few minutes later, and he looks, and here's this huge animal out there. He said, I thought I was losing my mind. Looks like what I saw in the zoo. He said, this thing looked like a big black panther with glowing yellow eyes just staring and growling at me. He said, I took a shot at it. I didn't know if I hit it, but moments later, it physically vanished right in front of him.
Wow. So what is, when you're describing these glowing eyes, do you think this is like eye shine as we would think of it?
You know, I've had many hunters who didn't believe in Bigfoot, who later in their lives encountered a Bigfoot, and a lot of the cases the eyes were luminous, and these guys all know what eye shine looks like. They're familiar with what they see with deer and rabbits and things like that. They said this is completely different. I mean, it was glowing, luminous, and there's no moon out on these nights. There's no artificial light in the area to check any type of cause any type of reflection. Those are all things we look at. These are all really interesting cases. I've had cases where hunters in woods have watched the Bigfoot at fairly close range that had luminous, let's say, reddish eyes, and every time they would turn its head, it would change from a green to a red color and back and forth.
Dolly, I've got a question for you. You're really familiar with animals.
Yeah.
Are there any animals on Earth that have luminous eyes?
Well, you have bioluminescence, and you have different ones in the oceans, and I believe there's some others. I can't think offhand, and there is a few rare ones, but they don't fit in the categories we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm a USDA registered zookeeper. I've taken animal zoology and as everything in my family owned a zoo in Florida, and I am a big cat expert. And at night, certain animals, depending on what lighting is available, like if there's a big full moon and the moon is less yellow and more bluish tinted, their eyes can glow green. If you're pointing a laser light at them on your gun, if you've got aiming technology, laser technology, their eyes will light up red. I know because we've done it. I've seen it myself. There's all kinds of reasons for the eyes to change luminosity at night.
That doesn't account for the fact that, for example, in that case, it was a very credible witness that the animal vanished right in front of him after he fired on it.
Well, that's creepy. Yeah, I agree with that. That's creepy.
In March of '83, in daylight, this is a suburb of Pittsburgh called Bloomfield. This was such a big story, it made the local newspaper. So you have a big fence that surrounds a large wooded area with a big auto dealership. And that morning, there's a mechanic putting a headlight on the car when this huge black panther dives over the fence, lands a few feet away from him with a dead animal in its mouth. He could smell it. He's looking right into his big fang-like teeth. The thing momentarily at that point turns around, jumps back over the fence. So the mechanic sees it, then he calls other people. They see a big one and a small one walking together on the other side of the woods. That leads to a big search by the Pittsburgh police and the animal protectors with tranquilizer guns. There was a big search for this thing and never found it. And
Yeah.
there's very few black jaguars, black leopards in captivity, especially back then in Pennsylvania. And the first thing was nothing was missing anywhere. And it's another mystery. Where did it go to? How did they get there? Where did it go to? Why didn't they find anything?
Yeah, there's a problem with people with these kinds of animals. And I know this because I've made major rescues in my lifetime of animals that were held in captivity by private citizens. They buy them young from a dealer and they think they're going to train it and it's going to be all hunky-dory and lovey-dovey. And they find out they've got a killer on their hands. And they'll take them out in the woods and they'll let them go. Leopards are predators, apex predators. And in our states, in the United States, they can hunt anything, anywhere, at any time. They also have one of the hardest bite pressure of any other animal. Jaguars and leopards have the two hardest bites. And they also have the ability, a jaguar can jump 22 feet in one bound. You won't even see them go. All right. They just suddenly, they're not there. Okay. And a leopard can jump just as well, but they're better at jumping down than up. So you might have some idiots out there owning one or the two of these
I'm
animals.
aware of that because I can tell you, dealing with a lot of mountain lion sightings, we knew for years that in fact people did have some of these captured animals they were keeping as pets, and then they couldn't control them, and they released them to the woods. So we knew that some of those reports at certain times, certain areas, were indeed pets people released. But we've never had any indication with the black species or whatever we're dealing with, because there's no melanotic version of the mountain lions. And so some of these other reports, and there's others that I have to even look up, that are very strange with the black panthers.
Yeah.
Well, very, very interesting. So you said you had another cryptid report that was really strange?
Oh, there's so many different ones. I mean, we get the Thunderbird sightings, all kind of different kind of things that people report. Are you familiar with the Thunderbird reports out your way?
My brother claimed that when he was a young boy, we lived in Illinois, that he saw a Thunderbird. He only told me once. He was really drunk. Was basically very skeptical, but if you gave him a drink or two, he'd start spilling some amazing stories and said, yeah, he saw this bird with a 50-foot wingspan and it wasn't a plane.
Wow.
That's all he would really tell me. So is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, well, 50 foot is extremely large and unusual. Most reports are talking about 10 over 20 foot in width. And I've had, it's very hard, just like with UFOs, very difficult to judge altitude and size.
Exactly.
It's the same with these type of reports. And, but they've been coming in for years and years. I've had sightings now of these things in daylight on the ground at close range eating a roadkill. I had one incident in neighboring West Virginia years ago where a witness was going down a 2-lane road and had to hit his brakes hard. There's this huge creature that was taller than the top of his vehicle, standing there, hopping from one leg to the other and flapping its wings. So it's a 2-lane road, and he's watching this thing trying to get off the ground. It's staring at him, they're staring at each other, and there's dust and dirt going up from the edge of the wingtips on both sides of the road. And it finally got up over the trees, and it was gone. He went back the next day to measure it. It was 21 feet across.
Wow, okay.
Wow.
But I'll give you an example. Berry Township here in southwest Pennsylvania is a very, very busy area for all kind of reports. And I mean, all kind of cryptid reports and strange reports. And anyhow, this was in Berry Township. This was January, February of last year. Now, this guy, again, like so many of these people out in this area, they live with animals, they live with deer, they've been hunting for years, and this guy's been hunting for a long time. He's up at 3:30 in the morning because they always have to travel early to get to his job. So he's riding down the road, and he first sees in distance what he thought was a deer. And then he realizes this thing, whatever it was, suddenly it has large wings spread out. And he sees this thing, and he's getting closer and closer to it, and it's slowly flapping its wings as it's rising off the ground. He said the head of the creature was first looking at the side of the road, but when it noticed its car, it snapped its head, looked directly at the vehicle as it rode off above the ground and over the trees. But he said this thing was apparently all black, and that's very common. It's generally dark black or brown. And it had at least a 10 to 11 foot wingspan from the distance he was. He said the wings looked something like an eagle. He said there was a white color mixed in with the black feathers at the tip of the tail. The head of the creature was facing him, as it rose up, you saw what appeared to have been the tail to be about 4 feet long. He said the creature stood approximately 6.5 to 7 feet tall. He said what really caught his attention were the eyes. They appeared to be diamond-shaped, about 7 inches across, were glowing a bright red. So you get these kind of glowing reports from a lot of these different creatures that people are seeing. And but I wanted to tell you too, going back to the Black Panther, we didn't talk about that. There's a connection. Sometimes Bigfoot is seen with another cryptid, including a Black Panther. So back in 1979, on the border of Armstrong and Westmoreland County, an incident began when some kind of an object fell from the sky into the woods. The locals began to hear screams and howls. They began to have Bigfoot sightings there. They were finding unusual footprints. They were seeing small orbs. We haven't talked about the orbs yet either. And that went on for a while. And then 1981, 82, and that area was very, very busy with Bigfoot sightings and orbs and creature sightings. And one of the local TV stations did a special TV report on it, took it very seriously. But at the same time, there was an outbreak of Black Panther sightings in the area while the Bigfoot activity was going on. So sometimes in some of these areas and some of these properties, we have a long history of various type of anomalies. You get more than one cryptid type report coming in, just like you do at Skinwalker Ranch.
Well, that's very interesting, because I do know of a case in Colorado at a ranch. Katie Page is really the researcher on this location, but there was an incident with essentially a landed UFO, gray ETs, other types of ETs, and a Bigfoot all standing around this UFO. I know of other cases where people have seen Bigfoot standing next to ET. There's a California case. It's historical, reported by Native Americans, I think over 100 years ago. But they said that they saw this object, very shiny, metallic, come down land, and a Bigfoot came out. Do you have direct cases where Bigfoot have been seen going in or coming out of a UFO, or been seen on board, or how close is this connection?
There's multiple reports in the book I wrote, Solid Invasion. I wish we could go through every report. There's so many, but one of them, just from memory now, because there's so many reports in there. I remember in there, this is near Penn, Harrison City, where there had been a lot of history of Bigfoot sightings back then and even since then. And even one of the first UFO landing missing time cases occurred in that area in the late 60s that I was involved with. And I believe that guy 100%. It was a very, very interesting case. It was the same general area. But anyhow, a guy called me, I think it was around 3 o'clock in the morning, and he said he's calling for a friend, as I recall. They were afraid to tell anybody, but several, I believe it was women, were coming home from vacation or something. They saw this object landed on the ground. A ramp came down, and they swear they saw these 2 huge things running into the woods. So it's pretty close to what happened. I'm going by memory.
Wow. Yeah, I've got a theory about some of this. I'm wondering if possibly some of these Bigfoot are contactees, much the way a person is, and are being contacted by ETs. Because I'm convinced that while there's these connections here, that we're dealing with extraterrestrials, people very much like us. I'm not quite willing to lump all these phenomena together, even though there is a connection here. So I don't know. It's just
again, we can theorize forever because nobody knows for sure. But sure. I do believe, from what I'm seeing, we just talked about a few cases. There are so many other instances. For example, I'll give you one from November of '73. Guy's on his property. He has a lot of property out in the country. He's a hunter. He has hunting dogs. And that evening, it was almost dark. He has his hunting dogs, and he's running with the dogs. And in the distance, he sees somebody running on his property. So he starts yelling at him and say, "What are you doing?" As he got closer, he realized it's not a person. It's a tall, hairy creature. It almost looked like an ape-like creature. He grabs his pistol. He's firing some shots at it. He said it physically vanished, but he could still hear it running, but he couldn't see it.
Oh, wow. That's intense.
Yeah, there's so many details out there that people are not aware of. And it's not just in Pennsylvania. This stuff's going on all over the country. And it's getting stranger and stranger. If you only had 1 or 2 reports from people, you could say, well, it's their imagination. When you get so many credible people who don't believe in these type of things, you've got to keep an open mind because there's patterns to it. And it's very interesting. It's very complex, and it's so beyond our understanding right now that nobody knows what's going on.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten okay, I'm going to bring this up because somebody in chat mentioned it. Have you ever had anybody say that they've seen a gargoyle?
I wouldn't call it a gargoyle, but we had one case here in Pennsylvania, again, up in a wooded area in Fayette County, where the person reported what he believed was a very close dragon sighting. And,
wow.
And we've heard people talk about gargoyles. Well, I'll tell you one that's pretty famous in Pennsylvania. I investigated it. This was, let me see my memory, is March of 2011 near East Brady, Pennsylvania. And I've interviewed this guy many times. Probably doesn't want me to say what his background is, but let me tell you, he's very educated, and I would call him, well, he's a very professional person. And anyhow, he's riding down this road. He's coming home. It's around midnight. He's riding down the road, and his headlights to the right in the field catches something bent down. He thought at first it was a deer. Suddenly, this thing rises up from the ground. It's right, very close. It's got to take 3 big steps across the road and gone. So I interviewed him. He called me a couple of days after it happened. And he said, I've heard people talk about Bigfoot. He said, this thing was not a Bigfoot. It was at least, it walked in front of a sign. That sign was 8 feet off the ground. It was a little bit taller than that sign. It never looked at him. He only saw from the one side of the creature, never looked at him. But he said this thing had light leathery skin. It had claws for hands. The eyes were swept back, and it had wings tucked into its back.
Yeah.
And
can I tell you something?
The next several days, there was the Butler Research Group had several other people describing seeing the same thing in that area.
Can I tell you
something? Is this. You've got all these strange creature reports from all over the country of all kind of creatures that all these what appear to be unknown species. You can't have too many unknown species. You've got so many credible people who are carrying these things. You can't just dismiss the reports. And that's why I'm saying, maybe I'm using the wrong term, interdimensional, but these things under certain conditions, they come into our environment. They leave physical evidence at times. Sometimes they look completely physically solid. Other times they're not always are, but sometimes they leave some evidence behind. These things come and go, they're here and they're gone, and we don't understand what's happening.
Yeah. I got to see what I think it was a gargoyle, maybe a very young one. When I was working in the Army, I had been delivering munitions all day and half the night before, and I was coming home at 2:00 in the morning, and I lived in Pine Mountain, which is like 50 miles from the base, Fort Benning. And I was tired. Right? Yeah, and so as I'm driving up the mountain, there's one last house on the right before I climb the mountain with my vehicle, and it belongs to R.J. Reynolds. No kidding. And he's got this house with a copper roof and a big street lamp right off the side of the road and a big tree right by it. And I start to slow down because I can see in the light in the tree, it's reflecting in the tree. And I see this big black thing up there, and I don't know what the hell it is. And I'm thinking, vulture? What the hell is that? And I go slower and slower and slower. And when I did, I started to go under the tree, and it launched from the tree and slammed into my windshield of the truck. And with its nails clawed all the way down, it slid off the roof because it had been raining. Well, we were all wet. And it went down the front of my truck where I was like taking no prisoners, and I ran over it. I was jacked up. You know, it's a truck that's got a lift kit on it. And I hauled butt for the rest of the way home. I went in the house, got my gun, and sat on the porch for about an hour because I could not believe what I had just seen. It was black, leathery skin. It had a pudgy body and wings, black leathery wings behind it. Big glowy eyes and clawed
hands. Give me 2 minutes. I got to take a quick break, and I'll be right back. Got to get some water.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
You got it.
Okay.
You know what's really interesting? Talk about high strangeness. I think this was a case by Brad Steiger. Don't quote me on that. Yeah. But these girls, gosh, I think this was in England. I don't know. But at any rate, I'll never forget this story because these girls were at a birthday party and at someone's house, and they were playing with a Ouija board. And it moved around the pointer a little bit, and eventually it spooked them and they stopped playing. And the lights in the house went out. That's right. The lights in the house went out, and that spooked them, and they stopped playing. And everyone went home, and then she wakes up. I think it was her house in the middle of the night because she sees something in her room, and guess what? It's a Bigfoot in her room,
Wow.
right up to the ceiling. I don't know what to think of these kinds of high strangeness stories, but man, oh man.
I've only heard of Bigfoot, and I know one came around our property once, and then I heard it after the big tornado. I wish I had seen one for real, honest to goodness. Really, really wish I had, you know?
I'm back, guys.
All right.
Yeah, I was just telling a story where a girl had a Bigfoot appear in her bedroom. Have you ever had anything like that? In a Bigfoot appearing in someone's house?
I have heard of it. I cannot think of any cases like that, but over the years, I've heard a few reports like that around the country.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, but I'll tell you something else you probably never heard of before. I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier. I've talked to so many people about these things, it's hard to remember. But anyhow, back in, I believe, August, September 73, in an area called Beach Hills. This is an area between Greensburg and Dennett, Pennsylvania, where there had been a lot of sightings. So this lady was visiting friends. Now, this home is no longer there. There was hardly any homes in that area at the time. It was mainly woods. And this home was a low foundation to the ground. And she was there, and around early morning hours, she awakens. She had to go to the restroom. So she's in the restroom. She's sitting down. So you've got to visualize this now. She is sitting there, and about a foot in front of her is the window. She's hearing these unusual sounds outside, animal sounds, and suddenly this thing rises up from the ground, and the face of this thing is directly in the window, looking directly in her face. She described this thing as covering a lot of hair, more like a wolf or a dog, with fang-like teeth and luminous glowing eyes looking right at her. She was hysterical. She ran out there screaming and hollering. Her friends came over. She told them what happened. They called the state police. The state police connected her with me. And here was the interesting thing. She was so scared, she asked her friends to take her to her home several miles away. Within the hour, the same or similar Bigfoot showed up at her house.
No.
Oh,
Wow.
I've had other cases like that. It's not that common. We have other reports like that as well.
wow. Well, I've got a few questions from chat. I don't know if you can answer these because they're kind of specific. One is from Flea Market Gold. She's asking, have you encountered cases from the central Susquehanna Valley, Lewisburg, and the Williamsport area? I would imagine they're everywhere.
Oh yeah, well I have so many cases I can't begin to tell you, but I have reports from almost every part of Pennsylvania. Down around Lancaster, they have what's called the Albert Witch, and that goes back to the Native Americans. I believe the Susquehannock tribe talked about these small little Bigfoot around there, and over the years people keep seeing them up in that area. So a researcher by the name of Rick Fisher several years ago was heading early morning hours. It was still dark, heading out towards Marietta, PA. As he's riding down the road ahead of him, he sees what looks like a child playing in the middle of the road. And he's thinking, what the heck's a kid doing in the middle of the road this time of morning? As he gets closer and closer, he realizes this is not a kid. He comes right up very close to this thing, puts on his high beams, and realize this thing looks like a small, I believe around 4 to 5 foot tall, skinny, dark-haired Bigfoot. It turns around, has glowing yellow eyes. He's watching this thing, and right in front of him, it physically vanishes, and it's gone.
Holy cow.
Wow.
Yeah.
My cat is staring at the phone right now like, what is going on? She's entranced.
Yeah. So the other interesting thing is, we got to talk about these orbs, because I think this is one of the most important parts of UFO mystery that a lot of people are not really aware of, and it's really getting really intriguing out there.
Yeah, well, let's do
I
that.
know about these. You hear about people talking about orbs, and of course, an orb is a spherical object. But people call them balls of light, different names, different areas for them. I knew about these in the 60s. I've been calling them mini UFOs for many years. And over the years, I've had reports of these things on beautiful days, pacing vehicles on highways, entering people's homes and cars through open windows, sometimes going right through the walls of people's homes. That's even more recent. We're getting more reports of these things in the last few years of these things appearing inside of people's homes only a few feet away from them. What we're also getting reports is beautiful afternoons that these generally about a foot to 2 foot diameter luminous spheres of different colors are gliding right up to people. We had an incident last year that one of my research associates, Jim Brown from Fayette County, who's a real scientific, real instrumentated guy, he has built all kinds of instrumentation to work in these cases, and he investigated this. Well, late in the afternoon, this in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, north of Pittsburgh, was in her garden when suddenly this small glowing sphere floats right up to her, makes contact with her chest. She said it was cold, like it just came out of the refrigerator. She lost her balance. The thing hovered over her head and disappeared. These are the kind of things that are going on more and more. And back, we had the biggest surge of these things in 2022 in Pennsylvania that we ever had, from all over the state. Incidents of these falls very close to people, on the ground in some cases, coming very, very close to people. Over the years now, more recent years, we've had physiological effects reported in some cases. So if you see one, keep your distance. That's being reported around the country as well. So in 2022, for example, early morning, a woman finds her husband out in the cold, sleeping on the porch in his pajamas, which he would never do. When she finally got him awake, he said he was going out to get the newspaper just been delivered, and the small little ball of light was hovering right near him, and he said he got so tired he couldn't stay awake, and he fell asleep.
Wow.
So 3 days later, maybe 30, 40 miles away outside of Ligonier, PA, so you've got the Chestnut Ridge area, and then you have a little spacing, then you have the Laurel Ridge, which is also active. So this person lives in the Laurel Ridge area, and it's about she lives in an old antique home. About 2:30 in the morning, she wakes up to go to the restroom. She goes in the bathroom, comes out. 5 feet away in her living room is this dark blue sphere, I think a foot and a half, 2 foot in diameter, hovering there with some kind of a dark mass moving around the side of it. She says, I remember taking one step towards it. She said, I felt like a slight electrical jolt. And then all of a sudden, she said, I got so tired I couldn't stay awake. The next day, she felt weak and sickly. She said, I'm an insomniac. I don't fall asleep like that. She had no explanation. So there you have two very similar reports within a few days of each other. And then these reports are getting more interesting because we had 3 incidents in the last year or so with a very interesting smell associated with these orbs. So one of these cases was November of last year up in that same area. So here's a person, she's at her desk on her computer. She measures, she was about 21 inches away from what happened. Her cat's sitting on the desk in front, near the monitor of the computer. Suddenly, this extremely small little sphere, about 1 inch or so in diameter, bright, solid-looking flat, suddenly appears out of nowhere. It moves across the screen to the right to left, and suddenly she said, I don't know how to explain, but something like a curtain, some kind of an opening, doorway, whatever, this thing floated right into it. Moments later, a second one, exactly the same, moved from right to left across the screen and into this little whatever it was, and then all of a sudden the curtain and the 2 objects all disappear. The cat put its paws up as though to grab it and decided not to touch it. Moments later, she said the whole room had this odd smell, but she said, I knew what the smell is because I smelled it like when you have a lightning strike nearby. She said it was ozone.
Right.
And there were 2 other reports a year before. One guy, again in Fayette County, Jim Brown investigated it. This guy told him early morning hours that he went into a room in the house he hardly ever used. He opened up the room, looked for something, and there, a few feet away from him, on the floor, right above the floor, is this 1 foot or 2 diameter luminous sphere. And as soon as he opened the door, this thing shot straight across the floor, went right through the wall and gone. And then I give you another, and there's multitudes of examples. Last year, in, I believe, January, early morning, the guy's making coffee, he's getting up, getting ready for work. He sees this reflection on the ceiling of the kitchen. He thought there was somebody outside prowling around with a flashlight. He looks out the window, and about 20, 25 feet away are these three basketball-sized orbs of light on the ground in a triangular formation. They suddenly merged into one where it got brighter and it shot straight up to the sky. These are the kind of things that are going on you're not hearing about.
That's crazy. Yeah, my sister-in-law had a orb experience. She had just had an OBE, and this being came up to her, which was an orb-like being. She said, "You're not supposed to be here, and I'll take you back." And she was put back in her body, and this orb, she said, appeared in the room and said, "Are you all right?" She says, "Yes, I'm fine." And then it departed, going into the light socket. I mean, just
it is so strange. But the other pattern is that I knew years ago. There's many researchers in the Bigfoot field will tell you the same story now. In areas where you have a history of Bigfoot activity, witnesses and researchers are also seeing these orbs all over the place. That's been going on for years and years. In 1973, during that major incident north of Pittsburgh, two women are waiting for a friend to pick them up. As they're standing there, this very tall, white-haired Bigfoot comes running across the road, but in one of his hands, he's carrying a glowing ball of light. And several hours later, this object came across the sky, projected a beam of light down to the woods where the creature ran into. Those are the kind of things going on. We know there's a direct connection with the orbs and the Bigfoot stuff. So there's an area up here, very much like Skinwalker Ranch, that the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society, Eric Altman and his team discovered while investigating Bigfoot sightings in that area. It's very remote, it's on private property. I've been up there 2 or 3 times now. It is one of the most remote areas I've ever been in. Even with big trucks, it's very hard to get into it. And they've been up there with various teams. They have some really good high-tech equipment up there. They've detected some very odd energy sources around there. There's been all kind of weird creature stuff, electromagnetic disturbances, orbs all over the place. So on this one particular evening, and in fact, you might be aware of Small Town Monsters production team. They're very good with Seth Breedlove. They were up there that evening filming, and some of this, what I'm going to tell you about, is recorded on video. And there's a series that's still out there. I think a lot of it was free on YouTube a while ago. It's called Sasquatch Unearthed the Ridge, and some of my associates and myself are in that film. It's several episodes long. But on this one particular night, and I was just with the witness a couple weeks ago, I know him very well, very credible, has a good job. And he was with these other teams who were up there investigating all the incidents up in that area, what they call Area X of Pennsylvania. And as they're there, they begin to report seeing these orbs of light coming out of the woods. They all have radios, so Tom is by himself for whatever reason at that point. And he sees these 2 lights approaching him. He thought at first it was a couple of people with flashlights. Then he realizes there's nobody there, that these 2 small spherical objects come very close to him. And then they just suddenly disappear. Within the next few days, I believe it was, he sustained major eye damage. Very bad eye damage. We have eye bleeds, surgery. He's on and off still having trouble with this. He's had several of the best ophthalmologists in Pittsburgh examine him. Nobody has any explanation for what happened to him.
Wow, that's crazy. We're getting towards the end of our show here, so we're going to have to say goodbye. I'd love to have you back to talk about Kecksburg, because we didn't even get to touch on that.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Well, we could talk for hours and hours. Kecksburg is very busy. I've got some really good new information. If you go to my website, stangordon.info, people can read some. But I put out a report last year on the 60th anniversary. I put out a lot of new details, which you'll find very fascinating. I figured out, you know what? It's been 61 years now, 60 of course last year. It's time that I release some other information. I was kind of keeping quiet about it until I had enough confirmation on it. And it's very much what falls in line with what the whistleblowers are saying about a recovery of objects that are non-human origins with both bodies and craft. And I have some very good information. I plan to be putting another report out on the next anniversary, December 9th, on my website. But Kecksburg's making a lot of news, and I don't know if you've seen Disclosure Day yet. Steven Spielberg's film, but I've been getting many calls and people, and there's reports all over the country now because in his film he does mention Kecksburg.
Very cool. All right.
Wow, that's amazing. All right. Well, do you have any last words for people before we say goodbye? Where can they get your stuff? You already mentioned your website. Your website.
Yeah, it's stangordon.info, stangordon.info. They can reach me. You can go to my website. You can reach me by phone, believe it or not. It's area code 724-838-7768. I get calls from all over the country and emails from around the world about these cases. And my books are available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. The Silent Invasion book is called Silent Invasion, the Pennsylvania UFO Bigfoot Case book. It goes into great detail about this UFO Bigfoot case of 1973 and a lot of things we didn't have time to even talk about, very strange things. And the newest book, Creepy Cryptids, you'll find it fascinating. There's creature reports of things there you never heard of before, and a lot of really detailed UFO and orb cases. So I think you'll find them very fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on, and I'm sure we'll do it again someday.
Yes, we will.
I look forward to it.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We truly appreciate that you could join us tonight. Namaste, Cherise. Thank you so much for your very generous donations. And yeah, chat loves you, Stan. People are absolutely excited about
Went crazy in there.
show. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad they like the program.
Yeah. Stan, stay on the phone for a few minutes after we hang up this. I want to go ahead and book you for another date. Okay? Would that be all right? All right. Okay. Okay, so we ready, Preston?
Let us go.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this Monday night. We are so glad you showed up. Want you all to go have a wonderful week. Please look up Stan's information and his books on Amazon. Very good reads, very interesting, well-researched. You should look them up. We're coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast. We're on Facebook, we're on Roku, we're on Rumble, and we're on YouTube. I want you all to go and be happy. Y'all take care. Night, night.